Good morning, everybody. I just want to congratulate you on your week 3 discussion board. I see that we have many poets, and you probably were poets and didn't know it. But anyway, I do want to congratulate you all that did post something, got through it, and got through it just fine, and you did well. I just looked at them. I haven't marked anything yet. I Later on in this week, I'll try to get everything marked that you guys have turned in the last several days. But just like you, as the semester moves on, I get inundated with work pretty much the same way. So just little patience, bear with me, and I will get it all marked and feedback back to you about the things that you've turned in. Now, another thing I want to say before we move into what I really wanted to talk to you about, which is the next project, because there can be no rest for the weary in academia, so we've got to get you working on something else. But when I came into my office this morning, there were 7 missed calls on my desk phone. If you call, leave a message. Leave a message and I will call you back as soon as I possibly can. I try to be really good at answering email and things as quickly as possible. I wish I was able to sit at my desk more often than I do. I do have office hours, but the problem is sometimes I end up with students somewhere else on the campus. So I stay pretty busy around here. So don't just give up. Find some way to communicate with me if you are having struggles or questions or comments, concerns, moans, groans, or complaints. Make sure that you get those to me, and I will address them as quickly and the best way I possibly can. This is about you learning something, and I really want to participate in that. So if you have anything, make sure that you come to me. Now, for this project that we're about to discuss, I don't want anybody to feel inept, okay? Because it's going to be a challenge for some of you. Some of you will be nothing. Some of you are already doing things like this. But if you've never created a video, and I hadn't until I started teaching these web classes, it can be a little intimidating. But don't let that bother you. Don't take yourself too serious. Don't worry about making things perfect, because as you can tell when I make my videos, I'm not making things perfect. I misstep, I mispronounce. Sometimes I get things out of order. Well, it is what it is. So just don't worry too much about the editing and the perfection and all of that. It's getting through the project. So enough said on that, and we'll talk about that a little more. But this project, and it's also in the folder, which is open, which is the Adolescent Poetry Response and Reading Project. It's, once again, a 2-part project. One of those parts will be to write a literary analysis, and you will also make a reading video of yourself working with a particular poem. Now, this will be due on the 22nd of October. It's a Sunday, and at the usual time, 11:59 p.m. So I'm just going to read down through this. Just follow along with me, and if you do have any questions, write them down. Make sure you email me or call. For this project, the student will choose a poem that is written by or directed towards adolescents, or the issues of concern for this age group. Now, this age group, roughly 11 through age 17. Okay, after making your selection, you shall perform a video reading of the poem, along with a short summary of your thoughts concerning the poem and its poet. You will also be responsible for a written literary criticism from a reader response perspective. Now, reader response is nothing more than a type or form of literary criticism. And that's where we are participating in whatever work, whether it's poetry or a piece of prose. You can look this up. It's easily found on the web if you want to know a little bit more about it or don't quite understand what that means. I wish we had a little more time to talk about literary criticism, but we really don't in this kind of structure of the course. So anyway, look that up. You will also be responsible for a written literary criticism from a reader response perspective. The following questions are examples of the comments that you should consider addressing in your video summary and in your written submission. So if you just get these 4 things in there, you're in really good shape. But you're still going to have to make a lot of choices. Now, once you've chosen your poem, why do you enjoy the poem? Why did you like it? Why did you even choose it? Okay? What was it about this poem that really appealed to you and you would want to share? Um, what words, phrases, sounds in the particular poem really appealed to you? Was there a monoponopoeias? Okay. Um, uh, were there those in there? Were there assonance? Was there consonants? Was these sounds? What was it about them that appealed to you? See, this is exactly what I'm talking about with your video. Sometimes you misstep a little bit and it messes you all up, but just pick yourself up and keep going. What does a poem mean to you? Now, this is really, really important um, because what it means to us is what it means. But how do we arrive at that? The thing we always have to remember that a text is always going to be three different things. First thing it's going to be is what a text says. And that's the very legal language. That's how we put the words together, we string them together, and we have a phrase or a sentence, okay? It's very legal language. It's the way we write contracts, straight to the point. We don't beat around the bush. You buy a new car, you sign a contract that says I want to pay $500 for the next 500 months. You miss a payment, we're going to come get it. It's that simple. But that's not always what a text is. Sometimes a text is what it does or what it describes to the reader. What situation, what circumstances, what is being described here that maybe goes beyond the legal language. Maybe we do have a very properly structured sentence or phrase, but why would we just do that? We want to describe something to our readers to get their particular attention. So we're going to describe something. It's for instance, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. Now, very legal language, we've got a lamb, we've got a little girl, and the lamb is white. Okay, very legal language. But as we move through that particular nursery rhyme, we find that what our poet is describing to us or what the text does becomes something more. We have Mary, this young, very virginal type girl. Then we have this lamb, which almost creates an illusion, not illusion, not a surprise for your eyes, but something that alludes to something greater. This white lamb, which designates something that is very, very pure. So as we read through the poem, we find it's describing more than a relationship between this little girl and her pet. It becomes something more. So that's what it's describing to us. And then last but not least, a text is always what it means. Now, a lot of people want to attach the word, well, how do we interpret that? Or the word interpretation. No, it has nothing to do with that. What a text means is what is our poet or our writer, our author trying to convey? What are they trying to achieve? So that's all that anything can ever mean, is what our writer is trying to achieve. So what do they want us to believe? What do they want us to think? What do they want us to know? So when we consider those things, those are the kind of things that you're looking for in what it means to you. Now, of course, it's reader response, so we respond to it differently, but we have to recognize, is it congruent with what our writer is trying to achieve? Now writers don't always achieve what they're trying to. Sometimes we take it a little different, but there are those little pieces of their motivation that are going to be taken on by us. So make sure you consider that. What elements of the poetry do you appreciate the most? You are the writer here. You can choose any of them that you want. Maybe you want to talk about the structure of the poem. Maybe you want to talk about its form, whether it's lyrical, it's narrative, it's descriptive. Maybe you want to talk about in a more intellectual manner. Maybe you want to talk about the rhyme and meter, step, iambic, pentameter. There's any number of ways that we can look at poetry. If you've never seen Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams, it's an older film, but it talks a lot about poetry and the way the world looks at poetry. It is very clever language, but it becomes this huge interpretation. But the way that Mr. Keating, who Robin Williams plays in the movie, really throws all that away and says we should look for the beauty and the meaning in poetry within the poetry itself, rather than measuring it in this intellectual way. But if that's what you want to do, that's entirely fine. Many of you will pick blank verse type poems because they're very contemporary. So as you're looking at those, maybe you want to discuss the language or the words or the way the words are put together um, to come up with whatever meaning, what it says, what it does, or what it means. Maybe you can also work with those sounds, alliteration, consonants, onomatopoeia, those types of things that you may find in some of them. Maybe you want to deal with the literary elements, similes, metaphors, symbols, those types of things that we find pretty readily in poetry because they are definitely clever language. Okay, but deal with those things. Now here's kind of a message to the wise. Work on the written portion first. Now I know some of you with your fairy tale project, because I did look at a couple of the analyses, and I find that, and I try to make this up front before I even start grading them to get some idea where the class is in general. And it is obvious to me that some of you worked your presentation first and then worked on the writing part. You should always do it the other way around because we don't make movies and then write the script. We have a script and then the movie. Well, essentially what your criticisms and your analysis are going to be the script, if you will, for your presentations. Whether it's a PowerPoint or a video, the written stuff, the research, everything that you've already produced will pay huge dividends and cut down the amount of time that it takes you to work the project out. So make sure you work on the written portion first. Now, just continuing on with this, since the digital space is of great concern for the university, you should create and produce your video through YouTube. Now, this is an important factor. Blackboard will allow you to create a video and post a video, but the college or the university doesn't want us to do that because it soaks up lots of space. So YouTube is the best possible site to do this in. Even in my face-to-face classes, I like video projects because people tend to like them a little better. They feel like they're doing less work when maybe you're actually doing more. But the problem with video projects, there are so many different formats and platforms to create videos, is that when you come into the classroom to watch them, unless we have that particular format or that particular software, we can't open it up. So going to YouTube, they have all those tools. It will let you upload any format from any platform and make it viewable by the world. So we want to use YouTube for this. Now, it's a really simple process. It's not something that's complicated. I did it in just a very few minutes, and I had never made a video before I started teaching web classes. So all you need to do is go to YouTube, create an account. It's going to send you back to Google, okay, because Google owns YouTube. You'll go to Google, create a Google account, then it'll send you back to YouTube. You create a channel for yourself. You can call it whatever you like. That's entirely up to you. Mine's called Eagle Pass English. So you can do whatever you want to with it. Then you make your video and upload it. No matter what format it's in, it will take it. Now, if you get your video up into YouTube and you don't like it, there are plenty of tools there for editing and adding little tags to it and faces and pictures. And that's, it's nothing I see myself ever doing. It's kind of the overachiever kind of thing. But get it in there. That way we can all watch it. Now, once you get that done, you're going to, after you've created your video, you're going to take that link it gives you, and you're going to put that into the discussion board that's provided and open for you. Once you do that, that allows all to watch them. So once you do that, watch some others of your classmates, watch their videos. And I would like for you to respond to at least 3 of them with the usual 100 words. Now, I can mark things and you can get a great grade, but nothing is ever as nice as one of your cohorts, one of your compatriots commenting on your work. So I want you to make sure that you do that. Now, this is one that I will also be participating in. I'll upload one that I've chosen to read and discuss, and I'll post that up too. And I'll try to make sure that I have that up earlier so that you guys can kind of see that and maybe some of the elements, things from the rubric, so that you won't be lost with this. Now, the thing to remember in all of these projects, you're all going to be teachers. So the way I've tried to design these things is for you to take the perspective of the teacher. So when you're creating the fairy tale presentation or this one and some we're going to do in the future, it all has a lot to do with teaching. If you were tasked with teaching this to a group of students, how would you do it? So really that's the way to approach this. You've got a poem here that you chose. It means a lot to you and you want it to mean the same thing to everybody else. So as you're approaching this, approach it as a teacher. How am I going to teach everyone in our class? There are 28 of us in this class, 29 if you count me. So think about the 29 of us. What is it that you want us to know about this poem? So approach it this way. Okay, this of course is a creative project, meaning you have lots of room for creativity and sharing your personal response. I have never been one, and I hated it as a student when I was expected to regurgitate what my professor said, and I will never ask that of you. I want you to be creative. I want you to use all the academic freedom that you can kind of muster up for this, and I want you to share that with us, okay? It's not important that you repeat something that I said or something that I wrote, something like that. Not important to me. I want to see you in all of this because that's who you're going to be when you walk into that classroom. You're just going to be you. Now, sure, we pull in from one another and I still learn from you guys. But the point is, make this uniquely yours and creative. Now, your literary criticism, the paper you have to turn in, minimum of 2 pages, maximum of 3. So I'm not asking for all that much from you, okay? Now, the thing I will say about this one, as opposed to maybe some other things that you've written that are very internalized, because you'll notice when you start to read some of these poems and it means something to you, and you start to share that with people, you have a really hard time writing in the third person. You're going to want to say, in my opinion, I believe, I think a lot. Don't do that. Still an academic piece, so make sure that you're conveying everything in the third person. And those things that are very, very personal, you can convey those in the third person. You just have to teach yourself to do that. So remember, stay out of the first, stick to the third person, everything will work out. 2 to 3 pages. Make sure it's an MLA because that's the convention for the English discipline. I'm not asking for any outside sources, just the poem itself. Now, anytime that you're going to discuss anything about the poem, whether it's the message, the elements, the sounds, you have to give textual evidence. So make sure that you do that. Now, there is a way to cite poetry in your text. If you're not familiar with that, let me know and I'll try to make sure that I share that with you. Maybe I'll make another video before we get too close to this so that when you're putting these things together, you'll understand the way that these things need to be documented and cited in your paper. No outside sources, but make sure you use textual evidence. Now, here's one thing that I do know that a lot of people try to do is when you're confronted with something that you've got to write about, we try to go to the open web and we're going to Google a poem. And we're going to try to see what somebody else has said about this. Now, there's nothing wrong with learning a little bit more. But the problem is that we tend to regurgitate things. I went through this period, I was reading Patrick O'Brian novels. Everything I turned in at school was written just like Patrick O'Brian would write it. So that's really not a great thing. Because in this kind of a project, I'm looking for your criticism, for your commentary. I could care less what Harold Bloom or Ezra Pound or any of those other great literary critics have ever said, and even those that are more contemporary. What you have to say is just as important as what they have to say. And in most cases, it is probably better because this appeals to you. So I'm more interested in you breaking this thing down, that you're looking at it, and as you extricate, which tearing it apart, breaking it apart piece by piece, as you extricate, that you do it your way and not worry so much about those critics, and especially those that you're going to find on the internet who sit around in their underwear all day long writing copy for the internet for a nickel a word. So do your own stuff because that's what's important here. Now, I've also added to the assignment sheet some locations that you can go to find some poetry. YouTube is also filled with adolescent poetry and poetry written by adolescents. So the sky's the limit. You can get it from anywhere you want to. But I will say, and I get this every term, well, I saw this poem in Where the Sidewalk Ends, and I really, no. That's behind us now. Go on, challenge yourself to new things. So even though a lot of Shel Silverstein, as you saw in my commentary in week 3, is that, I mean, he really appeals to me too. But expose yourself to more and more and more. So be very broad. Pick something outside of that. Like I say, the sky's the limit. Also in the folder for the project is also a rubric for the reading presentation, because that's usually what intimidates most of us the most. Use the rubric. That's the way I'm going to score it. I mark everything by a rubric so I can make it fair. Now, it is a little unfair because it is kind of a sliding scale and I have to make some determinations. But for the most part, this is what you're trying to hit on. So anyway, that's about all I have for you. Make sure you're creative. Choose what you like. Okay, just make sure that it fits in that adolescent poetry type, I guess, genre or form, or those, or addresses things that are of concern for that particular age group, 11 to 17. But if you do need anything, do not hesitate to call or come by or to email, and I will get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. So you guys have a great week. I'll be talking to you again in the near future. And I hope you enjoyed this project. Have fun with it. If you're not having fun with all of this material or with the projects, then, maybe you ought to reevaluate yourself and don't take yourself so serious. But have a great week, and I will talk to you again in the future. Bye-bye.